welcome to Plumbing Solutions Educational Series. In this episode, I want to talk about one of the simplest tools and probably the most widely used tool you've got in your tool bag, and that's the screwdriver. Here in America, we've pretty much got two different types. You've got your chisel tip or your flathead screwdriver, and then you have your Phillips screwdriver, which was named after the man who patented this design. Now, in order to talk about the screwdriver, we need to talk about the screw. Well, what is a screw? A screw is an inclined plane wrapped around a centralized shaft. That's the technical definition. Now, the history behind the screw. The screw wasn't really used as a fastener until about the 1500s, but the screw has existed since the first millennia BC, so it's pretty ancient. And the first written documentation we have of the screw was a man by the name of Archimedes. He went to Egypt and he saw these guys using the spiral type device with a crank on it to pump water. Well, he documented, he didn't invent it, but it got nicknamed the Archimedes screw. After that, the screw, you see it in wine presses, you see it in olive presses, and then much later on, and really influential here in America, the printing press. But these things were custom made. They were large devices that used rods to press it down. It wasn't really a fastener. We didn't really see the screw being used as a fastener until firearms entered the battlefield. Now, the first firearms were your wheel lock or your flintlock rifles, and they use basically flint and steel. Well, that flint has to be replaced. It wears out pretty rapidly. Well, they needed something to hold it that could be changed quickly and put back together. That's when they came up with the screw idea. Now, these were flathead screws because it's much easier to make a flathead screw than any of the other types because it's just kind of cut in there or hammered in with a chisel. But those weapons, those screws were individually custom made for those particular weapons. We didn't have interchangeable parts until you get to what was the real first rifle, and that would have been in the American Revolution. And then you've got interchangeable parts and all that custom stuff goes away. But after that, the screw, it really sees its light of day when we get to talking about Henry Ford and the Model T and the Model A. The Model T was made out of wood. They used a lot of screws. The Model A was made out of metal, and it also used a lot of screws. Well, they needed to come up with something a little different. Anybody who's ever used a flathead screwdriver to drive a flathead screw, it's got its problems. It likes to slip off. If that screw is painted, you might have to dig that paint out, but it's not the best thing in the world. And something I found out in doing these episodes in series, a lot of time when innovation comes into play, it's because somebody got hurt. Now, if you've done any kind of mechanical type stuff or anything like that for a long duration of time, you've slipped with a flathead screwdriver and poked yourself. So be careful with those, but that was the driving force for the invention of the other types of screwdrivers. And really, there was one before the Phillips, but it was a Canadian one. It was called the Roberts screwdriver, and it was basically a square head design. Now, we do have square head screws here nowadays, but we don't call them a Roberts screw. We call it square head. Difference in timing, difference in patterns and things like that is why these names are the way they are. Now, the Phillips head screw was the one we did have here. And if you've used Phillips head screws, you know that screwdriver head kind of locks in there really well, and it's not as likely to slip off. And a lot of times that screw will just stay right on the end of there. You're not going to do that with a flathead. But flatheads are still widely used. They still have their purpose. but you're pretty much going to be using your Phillips head screwdriver. And it's simple. They're simple to use. It's a simple device. Everybody probably has one in their drawer at home. Their dad probably had one. Their grandfather probably had one. They've been around for quite some time. Now, when using any tool out there, any tool in your toolbox, you're going to want to wear some gloves and you're going to want to put your safety glasses on. And basically, just to demonstrate what you do with a screwdriver, I got a board here and I got two different screws. I got a sheetrock screw, and you just turn it clockwise to drive it in, or counterclockwise to drive it out, or righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Now, pretty much we use a lot of sheetrock screws, and we use these larger screws to anchor like our toilet flanges, and we do have wood screws and things like that. They've got different coatings on it. The shiny silver one here is a galvanized screw, and the sheetrock screw is just a painted screw. Now, sheetrock screws are great for anchoring tubs or doing things in a wall or something where there's not, it's not going to be in the weather, it's not going to get rained on. But you don't want to use these sheetrock screws outside, say to anchor a hose bib or something like that, because they can rust, and they will rust over time. Your galvanized are going to hold up a little bit better. There's some hot dipped screws that we like to use, a wood screw, and various different types, various different varieties. But whenever messing with any kind of tool, wear the proper safety equipment, because you don't want to get something in your eye, and you really don't want to cut your hands because you need them every day. But that's the basic gist of a screwdriver.